All right, guys, let me try and just work through a couple of these. I'm going to mute everyone except for Walter, who is going to be giving our presentation. Again, if you don't know me, my name is Dave McCorkadale. I'm the Assistant City Administrator for the City of Montgomery. And to give you a brief overview of this process, we are almost the 2-year mark from when the city first started this process. This process was started in April of 2018 when the city had applied for a grant-funded project through Texas A&M, their Community Resilience Collaborative Program, and so Texas Sea Grant ended up helping us out with a comprehensive plan. We've had a total of 5 community meetings. They focused on areas like economic development, transportation, and other city functions. With that, again, we were working with Texas Sea Grant primarily. Walter Peacock is a city planner with them, and he has been primarily working on this for us. And so with that, I'll add one more thing. If you've never used Zoom, down at the bottom of the screen, you will see a little chat feature. Any thoughts or questions that you have on about the material that you see tonight, please put those in the chat column over there. We will do our very, very best to answer all those questions tonight, but any that we don't get to, we certainly will. So, and if it looks like, again, it looks like almost everyone, we can see their name and who's a participant. If you know, for instance, your sign-on name is iPad124. If you want to drop us a note again in the chat, just to let us know who you are, we'd be glad to, to know who you are and include information for those that have been participating. So with that, I will turn this over to Walter and let him take it away. Walter?
Today, and please, if there's any problems today, I'm sorry. It's my first time doing a Zoom meeting, and also my first time sharing my screen during a Zoom meeting. So just very quickly, can you guys see my shared screen?
No.
Yes.
Yep,
Yes, okay, great. And it says Montgomery Comprehensive Plan Public Meeting, correct? Okay, just double checking, and let's go ahead and get going. All right, so today we're going to do a couple of highlights of the comprehensive plan that I have been working on for the last year and a half. And today we're going to talk about a little bit about the program, the planning process, land use, housing, transportation, community facilities, economy, implementation, and funding. So I myself work for Texas Sea Grant. I'm a planning specialist with them, but we are part of a bigger group called the Community Resilience Collaborative, and our thing is to work with other organizations inside and other groups within inside of Texas A&M to provide research and extension-based coastal planning. And you might be saying to yourself, well, Montgomery is not really a coastal community. That is true, but everything, all the waters that go through Montgomery affect all the coastal communities that are down leading to the sea. And so it is important to have some idea and some planning in the communities that are upstream so that to protect all the communities along the coast. And our big goals for the program is to help communities adopt high quality plans to achieve locally defined visions of sustainable development, promote and increase resilience of our communities from natural and technological hazards, to be good stewards of the environment, to monitor and enhance and or restore habitats, ecosystems, and provide service and the services they provide, ensure local and scientific knowledge is leveraged in the planning and other decision-making processes. And we do this through increasing community capacity, through our social, economic, natural, physical, human, and civic ties. These are all things that we want to bring to the fold when making these type of plans. This is part of our collaborative. These are all the groups that are actually currently participating in our collaborative. So not only do we have Texas Sea Grants and the National Sea Grant Office, we also have the Landscape Architecture and Urban Planning. We have Texas Target Communities and the Texas Institute for Sustainable Communities. But why do we make a planning process? Why do we make a plan? What's the point of a comprehensive plan? Well, a comprehensive plan is a vision of where a community wants to be over the next 20 to 30 years. It depicts an overarching vision. It's a public document that justifies cities' decisions. It guides individual development approvals. And elected officials and the planning board can use this as a guide when they're trying to make their decisions. It's a legal basis for land use regulations, i.e. zoning, subdivision regulations, and it's the basis for capital improvement projects. But the last one is the most important thing. It opens up new funding opportunities and grants. A lot of times these grants and funding opportunities are a very competitive process. But if you show whoever the grantee or whoever the grantor is, that you have a plan, that you have a vision for how your community is going to grow over the next 20 and 30 years, it gives you a step up. It moves you to the next part of the process, and that's the key goal to it. So like Dave said earlier, Jack Yates actually applied to Texas Target Communities for a comprehensive plan to be done. Unfortunately, it was not awarded in that, but Texas Sea Grant decided that it was a community that we were interested in and we would like to step in. So that's how we got to where we are today. And actually in December 3rd, we signed a contract of cooperation between the city and between Texas Sea Grant and the city, saying that we're going to work together in good faith, try to produce the best possible document, and that it will be a give and take process, that I will do some work and that the city will also do additional work to help along this process. Because while I might, if I was working for a private firm, this might be my only project. Well, Montgomery is only one of multiple communities that I'm working on, multiple projects that I'm working on at one time. So like Dave said, we had 5 community meetings. We started off in March with a kickoff and State of the Community report that many of you guys participated in. We had our first public meeting in June 4th. In July, I know it says we only have 1 public meeting there, but we actually had 2 public meetings there for downtown and economic development. We had a transportation planning meeting, and finally a scenario planning meeting that we brought in a group of students from landscape architecture to actually design scenarios for the city. And today we have reached our final public meeting, which is a presentation of the highlights of the comprehensive plan, so that the community can get an idea of what's going to be. So this comprehensive plan, it involved 2 courses at Texas A&M, 30 students, 18 months of work, 2 faculty from Texas A&M also helped along in the comprehensive plan, 5 public meetings, and probably the most important part was that 67 individuals in these 65 individuals from the community participated in our public meetings, which is really good because it helped us get the idea from the vision of what we wanted to see in this comprehensive plan. And through that, we were able to make recommendations on housing, transportation, economic development, and community facilities. We also designed some master plans that the city could use in the future and a downtown design. And from all this work, we got a vision. And the vision goes as you can see on the screen. The city of Montgomery aims to be the home for families. We value our rich history as the birthplace of the Lone Star flag, small town feel, and our numerous amenities. We want Montgomery to be a place for families to have opportunities to grow, live, work, play, and shop. We must look forward to emerging opportunities and challenges while honoring and strengthening our close-knit community, healthy environment, and history. I hope you guys like, this is the vision that we built with all y'all's comments, but please make sure that you comment on this. Do you think this is the proper vision for your community? So we took this vision and we made goals for the community, goals that we could use to help build that future. Goal number 1 is to encourage a cohesive, diverse range of land uses across Montgomery to promote development in the downtown, improve drainage, provide a safe and equitable transportation network for all users of the Montgomery streets, promote alternative transportation modes, expand housing choices for all Montgomery residents, improve resilience of current and future housing stock, develop a resilient economy for residents of the city, support existing assets, support existing economic assets, provide equitable access to community services and facilities, ensure public facilities are safe and efficient, promote use of community facilities as community gathering places for events and training, and finally, improve signage and wayfinding in the community. Give me 1 second. I really need to take a sip of water. Sorry, guys. So, how do we use this plan? After all said and done, how do we use this? This plan is meant to be a guide. It doesn't provide actual regulatory laws that will be implemented, but it should guide the community to change different laws, regulation, ordinance, and zoning to improve the future of the community. It's yet again to communicate on an overarching vision, to guide development approvals, to serve as the basis of land use regulations, and to inform and support capital improvement plans. First part is land use. And this is an example, or this is a picture of the current zoning map for the city of Montgomery. And the big things that we would like to talk about is creating new classifications. A lot of the zoning that is currently provided by the city is mostly basic. There's not much room for mixed use or multifamily. You either have high density multifamily areas, or you have single family residence uses. That of course is outside of the planned development location. That's the big teal part on the top side. And that we should expand overlay zones that are currently provided by the city. The historic preservation zone and the monument protection zones are very important, but they should be expanded. We should include more. We should include more regulations that can go outside of that area to protect those historic areas and to encompass new development around them. For example, it would be in the downtown. We want to continue to be able to build and grow the downtown, and we could do this with either overlay zones or changing in the current zoning that is there, and then introducing better building design codes in these areas to promote infill, so that we can still protect our historic buildings, but then put in new buildings that look alike and have the same feeling that the old buildings represent. We also want to make sure to improve our parking by providing angled parking and providing outlines for where where that parking should be, providing wayfinding to where that parking is. Let people know where they are and why they should be visiting this area. Improve drainage, and so that as we increase our infill in this area, that we have ways that water will know where to go, and that it will not cause puddles and different types of flooding problems inside the downtown. Work with the Texas Main Street program. If you guys are familiar with that program, is they have designs and money and grants that they are willing to work with communities to help design the future of Main Street. I'm going to show you guys a small little video of what that means. Can you guys hear that?
I don't think so.
The deterioration of historic buildings to the changing face of.
Oh, you guys can't hear. I'm sorry. I apologize for that. So basically what it is talking about is that it provides design strategies and grants that are provided through the National Main Street program that will help to pay for design and development within the Main Street community. They do it through a four-faceted program where they make sure to A, promote, B, provide safety, C, it's a business-focused initiative that also promotes walkability in the downtown to make sure that you have not only outsiders coming to visit your downtown and spending money, but also makes it an enjoyable area for local community to gather and enjoy.
Retail.
Redefining the downtown. I know that a lot of times when we talk about downtown, we're actually talking about the historic area of downtown. I think that it's important that we expand it from just that area to areas around it. This is a good example of how we could expand it. And the big point is to connect those areas to the downtown so that people can walk, bike, use golf carts to get around, promote shopping, and to enjoy the historic flavor of Montgomery. We also want to increase mixed-use development, having either multifamily or townhome community in this area so that we can get more people off the street, out of their cars, and on the sidewalk walking to these areas, reducing the amount of traffic that goes through these areas, getting our community healthy and engaged and out into nature. Another example of a development that is a possibility for the community is using the planned development zone. This master plan here encourages ecological preservation, increased functionality, and creating green space, at the same time as increasing housing and connecting all this housing to the downtown and the historic downtown through mixed use, multimodal transportation, and yet again, encourage healthy living and active living, making sure that we are out in nature, walking and enjoying our community.
Hey, Walter, can I make
Yes.
a comment? Somebody, if
Sure.
speaking, everybody should be on mute, but Walter, there's some background noise and it's a little bit hard to hear you. Thank you.
Give me 1 second. It might be my fan. Did that help at all?
I think so. I think we've lost that noise at any rate.
Well, I apologize for my fan. Housing. So the big thing when it comes to housing in Montgomery is that currently we have quite a few housing units that are mostly single family households and a small amount of multifamily households. As you can see in this graph right here, that compared to the county and to the state of Texas, we have quite a bit more single family houses than multifamily, which we are the lowest out of compared to Texas or Montgomery. But we do have a little bit of mobile homes. Now, what does this mean exactly? it means that there is some market share that could be used to increasing the multifamily, or not necessarily multifamily, but maybe slightly smaller, more dense housing. One thing that we would want to do is reduce the amount of mobile homes that are in the community and replace them with duplexes or smaller lot homes that are cheaper and more affordable for those groups that might be interested in that. Yet again, in addition to that, the median housing cost in Montgomery is actually quite a bit higher than the county or Texas. Housing in Montgomery is quite expensive. And this is something that I actually just learned recently, because me and my wife have been looking for a new place to move, and we have actually been considering Montgomery, because you guys have all the schools that are right next to us, and we have a second baby on the way, so we really need to start thinking about schools. And it is close to her work where she works, and it's only 45 minutes away from my parents, which is really nice considering I'm an hour and 20 minutes away from them now. But the housing cost in Montgomery is quite expensive, a little bit more expensive than what I was expecting. The housing, now the population in Montgomery is actually also continually to grow. So if the number of houses do not increase, that means the housing prices in Montgomery will continue to grow. But if we want to grow at the same rate if we want to increase the amount of housing as we do with our population growth, that means that we could have a demand of 500 new dwelling units over the next 20 years. And I know Montgomery is quite a small community, but there is opportunities for higher density and at least more housing options. We can have multiple different single family units, but they might not be such on big plots. This is an example of a possible future master plan for residential development that is on the east side of, it's behind the what do you call it, the grocery store and the barbecue place. It's right there on 149. And the key features of this is that it increases the density of housing in Montgomery, and also offers multiple different types of housing sizes. So in the northwest corner, it provides multifamily, and we provide normal single family residence, and also provide duplexes and smaller units in these areas. In addition to this, this design wants to protect the ecological values of the community by creating a water retention zone that can be made into a pond that will allow us to have boardwalks and walking areas, and a possibility for a golf course in this area, which would yet again increase the amount of time people are spending outside and connecting to existing infrastructure that's already there. Transportation. As we all know, there's quite busy streets in Montgomery. Highway 105 experiences 1,300 to 1,900 vehicles through that road in a 24-hour period. And 149 right down there in downtown experiences 6,700 vehicle crossings in a 24-hour period. That makes it hard for the community to want to walk anywhere. And considering that it's right there in the downtown, these are things that you don't want to let your children walk across. You don't want to let your parents walk across. You don't really want to walk across those lanes. So what can we do to actually promote safety and also allow for people to get into these areas and cross? One thing is to create traffic calming strategies. Creating standards for sidewalks and bulb outs at the intersection of 145 and 105, 149 and 105, would be ideal. Bulbs out basically protrude into the road to make it so that the pedestrians are more visible at the intersection and improves line of sight at those intersections. We can also put in bike lanes that will act as a buffer between the sidewalk and the road. We can also increase pedestrian waiting spaces, giving pedestrians a part of the road where they are supposed to be and cars are not supposed to be. Reduce illegal parking at the corners of crosswalks and bus stops, which we don't have currently, but could be a thing in the future, and facilitating the ability to provide curb ramps at each corner. Some of the problems on the downtown is that if you were in a wheelchair, it is quite hard to actually get across or move around in downtown. There's lack of crosswalks to cross 149 and 105. And if you were to cross from one side to the other, if there's any type of difference in elevation, it could be hard for a person in a wheelchair to actually make it up to safety. Community facilities. I think that this is actually one of the big positives of Montgomery, and is the fact that not only do we have a fire department and a police department close to the downtown where we can actually, so they can protect the community, but we also have 4 schools that are located in the community. Which is part of the reason why I have considered to move here, is because all these amenities are located here. Also, Montgomery has great parks. They're right there downtown, and they have there's actually much more park space per person in Montgomery than a lot of other cities. But there's a problem with that. The big problem is lack of connectivity to these parks. Homecoming Park is really disconnected from the community. There's not much way to actually get there. There's not much bike path or sidewalk to get to there. Multiple comments that came in from the community was that there's a lack of sports facilities that the community has access to, other than I know that Homecoming Park does have a basketball court. But one way that we can improve this without actually building new infrastructure is to try to work with the schools to allow for people to be in there after hours, open it up to the public, or different types of things like that. This includes the playgrounds. I know that you have the administration office right near the downtown for the school, for the ISD, and that wonderful playground is fenced off from the public. There has to be ways for the city to work with the schools to see if there's ways to open these up. I know you guys have impact fees. I know that they are currently in place, but I am suggesting that we need to make new impact fees to accommodate for further growth. These could be impact fees that developers can waive if they create their own playgrounds or own outdoor activities. But we can use these impact fees we can charge a little bit of money from these new types of developments to build new sidewalks, to build new parks, to build better connectivity, to improve roads, all these type of things that we're not quite getting at right now. From what I can see in the current impact fees that the city has, it pretty much only covers for water meters and for water and sewer. I think this is an easy way to increase the amount of money that we can provide to make the community better. Economy. Now, for economy, actually Montgomery is doing pretty good. And I know I say that now as we're in this crazy pandemic of COVID-19. And before we go any further, I have to say that I think that the Economic Development Corporation has been doing a wonderful job with the media push on Facebook, talking about when the stores are open, how they're open, and how they can get to those stores to purchase their items. And also, I know that I believe, have provided funding to help those businesses pay for water bills and power bills. And these are great things. These are things that we need to make sure that we are helping out our fellow citizens and that no one else is going to care about us other than ourselves. If you have a favorite store, you need to be going there purchasing items. If you have a favorite restaurant in Montgomery, whether that be the burger place that was wonderful that we took all the students to, or the barbecue place, that you need to be spending your money there. You shouldn't be spending your money on McDonald's, or I mean, you can, there's not a problem, but try to protect what means the most to you and spend your money if you can in those businesses. Now, of course, all this data is pre-COVID, but Montgomery is actually doing pretty good when it comes to unemployment. They have a very low unemployment rate, and the median household income for the city of Montgomery is relatively high. It's not as high as Montgomery County. That's mostly because of Conroe and the Woodlands, which has really high incomes, and the people that work at the ExxonMobil campus in Spring. But they're doing much better than the state of Texas and much better than the United States as a whole. Now, if we actually look at what industries are growing the fastest in Montgomery, this starts to play a slightly different story. A lot of the growth that we see in Montgomery is actually in accommodation and food services. These are not the highest paying jobs. These are starter jobs, or I don't like saying that, starter jobs or kids jobs, because these are jobs that are very important and something that we definitely nowadays should take account for, because if they're not stocking the grocery stores, we're not getting our food. But they're not the most desirable jobs, and they don't pay as high. And if we look at the workforce flow, most of the people that work inside of the city of Montgomery actually come from outside Montgomery. And a lot of the people that work inside of Montgomery go outside to work at their jobs. That is kind of telling me that if our highest growth in jobs are actually these lower paying jobs, and that our average income in Montgomery is higher, that the higher paying jobs are actually outside the city. And is that something we actually want? Do we want a community that only serves people that work outside, or do we want higher paying jobs inside of our community? We want our people to live and work inside our community. And if we want that, we need to promote a more diverse and resilient economy. We need to work with our Chamber of Commerce to find strategies to target businesses, high-paying jobs that we want to be located inside of Montgomery. Target these industries, create infrastructure to attract these businesses, and we will probably also have to provide some type of tax incentives for these type of businesses to move here. It needs to be a multi-pronged approach to get these high-paying jobs here. And also, we need to take a look at the people that are working inside of Montgomery that might not be making the highest amount of money. How can we promote a skilled workforce in Montgomery so that we can say, hey, business, we want you to work here. We want these high-paying jobs. Let's work out a deal on the infrastructure. We got that. Let's give some tax incentives. We can do that. Not only that, but we have a highly trained workforce so that you don't have to relocate employees to here. You can actually employ the people that are in our own community. Another thing is to continue to promote local businesses here. I think the Economic Development Corporation is doing a wonderful job, and I think that there's a couple things that they can do to not necessarily do a better job, but that can do a little bit more. One thing could be having a business of the month business of the quarter, showing how this business is a star example of what we want in our downtown, how they have bettered our community, how they have protected the history of Montgomery, or how they have spent their own money to improve the downtown in one way or another. These type of things can help build a community inside the downtown, and competition between these businesses to say, oh, I can outdo you. I can show that I'm better, or I can provide more money, or I can make my business look nicer and bring in more people into the downtown. So the next part is the implementation table. This is the real nitty-gritty, the meat and potatoes of the comprehensive plan. And what it does is, yet again, the comprehensive plan is a living document. A lot of this data and facts need to be changed and updated as time goes. And part of that will reflect in the implementation table. And the implementation table specifies recommended policy changes, goals, objectives, actions, along with annotated timelines with the responsible parties. As you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, I have a list out of responsible parties and what acronyms I'm going to be using in this table. And in this table, this is what it looks like. So we have our goals: encourage cohesive and diverse range of land uses across Montgomery. The objectives, and it tells you when and what are the action items. It tells you when we should be, what time frame we should be doing it, what type of action item is it, and who is the responsible party for this type of change. In addition to that, it tells you what type of funding could be used for these processes. If we look down at action at the promote downtown development, there's multiple different types of funding sources that we can see there. This is the type of stuff that you can take to grantors and say, hey, this is our implementation table, this is our goal, this is our vision. We would like to work on this action item. How we're applying to you for this money so that we can complete this action item. In addition to this, we will have a funding guide. This is an excerpt of the funding guide. It is broken down to every single thing you can think of that relating to the city and the planning. So we have housing, land use development, infrastructure, all that stuff. Within this funding guide is available grants and programs, who the grantors are, what is the purpose of this grant and the funding, how much you can ask for, what are the limitations, and when are the deadlines for these different grants. So as you're saying, as the community goes through action, whatever, okay, I see that I need to do this. What are the funding options for this? We look at the funding guide and say, oh, we can use this to actually apply for it. Here's our deadlines, and this is how much money we can do, how much money we can ask for. All these things kind of work together to build a strategy to actually get our goals and visions done. That is it. Questions, comments?
And just as a reminder for everyone, if you have questions, don't forget to unmute yourself. I think I have everyone muted, but please unmute before you ask any questions.
And I'm sorry for the beach behind me. I don't know, this is like a group account, and I'm not sure who did that, but it looks nicer on the screen than it is in person. I promise you that.
I guess I have a question. This is Julie Davis, and my biggest question is, hasn't the biggest holdup for the city with regards to development been the lot width variances and that we aren't accommodating them? So what does that look like for the city to move forward with MEDC holding up lot width variances?
I can probably field that, Walter, if you can do. Yeah.
Please do, because I'm not sure the answer.
Yeah, Julie, it's been something With the, obviously, again, kind of the, a summation of our subdivision regulations are, kind of a one size fits all model, and what the city has been talking about, and kind of, one waiting to adopt this plan to kind of move into bigger and, kind of bigger issues or bigger scope of projects, but certainly, taking another, very critical look at how we lay out subdivisions and housing developments within our city is going to help us, as we move forward with these sort of new types of growth.
I will put on a second part to that. I think part of that is that the cities, there's not many different types of zoning choices. I think that the city needs to expand the possible or the amount of zoning or the categories of zoning so that they can adjust to different types of lot sizes. Another way of doing that is providing an overlay zone saying, okay, we know this is zoned single family residential, but this smaller area right here, we want to promote more dense or smaller lot sizes. Those are all things that the city can do and adjust for. And then in those types of zones, they can make adjustments to the ordinances that are there to accommodate for this type of growth.
And as a follow-up to that, given that the state has started limiting what cities are allowed to do, are we limited in our overlay? What kind of constraints that we can put on developers and adding additional restrictions and or zones?
Not that I know of. They shouldn't be able to. If you guys are not allowing these type of developers to do this, then the zoning, so the city has the power to zone. It has the power to self-manage itself within its city limits. I can see that how these changes might affect the ETJ, but within the city core, it's going to be a hard argument. One of the things that Texas A&M is currently looking into is providing law services to low capacity communities. And that is a topic that we have brought up, that the state is in one way or another controlling how growth goes into a community. It's going to be, it could be a little bit of a battle, but I think if the city has a plan and the city has codes and the city has zones, it's going to be really hard for them to overturn that in the court.
What would be the follow-up action that the city would need to take from your presentation today? And what would we do to go forward?
So the city, I will provide, so right now, the document is written, but it is not, it's lacking sources. I need to resource everything and make sure that all the figures are correct and put in there. I am expecting that the city will get the final draft from me on Tuesday of next week. The city will then need to open it up for public comment. And then the city can then vote to either to accept the plan or not. That would be the next stages. The other thing is, it is yet again, the planning document itself does not add any type of regulations onto the city that is not already existing. This is a recommendation type of document that takes a look at what are the current, what is the current, what is the current state of the community, and takes a look at the projections of how growth is going to continue in the community and make suggestions to deal with that type of growth. So I don't see it shouldn't be a tough sell for the community to pass it. Like I said, also, this is a living document. And one of the biggest, the census is currently going on. And the newest and most important, most accurate numbers will be coming out in the fall of 2021. And that is a time to actually look at what is currently in the comprehensive plan and see if the predictions that the Texas Water Board made were correct on when it comes to population. And then make adjustments from there. I think that getting this down and getting this passed and getting this as part of the city is important, because not only does it's a huge cost that the city no longer has to pay for. These things can cost anywhere from $60,000 to $100,000 for a community your size. And if having the document there means that you no longer have to pay this huge upfront $60,000 to $100,000, that either the community, the city itself, city staff can actually update it with these new numbers, or that you can pay a firm much less money to actually update it and continue updating it throughout the years to make sure that it aligns with the current growth and the current vision of the community.
So even if there's not necessarily consensus on, for instance, you talked about the need for more dense housing, and that's been, at past city council meetings throughout the years, that's been a big point of contention. So that might not be something that there's widespread community confidence in, but that doesn't necessarily mean that just because we adopt a plan that has that in there, that we have to immediately start having more dense housing. So having the plan and adopting it gives us access to the grant funds, and we can later either ignore some of the recommendations or go back and change them at our leisure.
Yes, that is correct. Because like you said, it is just guides. It's just a guide. It's a suggestion, and a lot of the suggestion is based upon the facts that we see and and what would be a normal recommendation for the community. But if the community doesn't want these type of things, then they don't have to do it. It doesn't force the community to do it. But it gives them the way to grow in this type of vision if they want to. So if it's something that the community does not want, then it should be written out, and that it should be adjusted, and we should make a new vision for the community that is what the community actually wants.
But I'm kind of, I'm up for,
I can't hear you
moving
right now,
forward.
Becky.
Can you hear me now?
I cannot. I still can't hear you, Becky. Oh,
okay.
It is my fault. I'm sorry. Somebody called my phone and that messed up my headphones. Give me a second. I am so sorry. Say that again, Becky.
So to be expeditious, we could continue as everything is right now in order to continue on the timeline that you laid out, even if we know that there's concerns with specific aspects. So it's either thumbs up or thumbs down if we want to move along quickly. And we can, like I said earlier, rewrite it at our leisure, certain parts as consensus may emerge.
Correct. And it's also one of the things that it's a great foundation. So I'm sorry I missed the first part of what you said. I'm really sorry about that. But it's a great foundation. So if the city decides that it wants to pay $5,000 or $10,000 to make adjustments, to make a new design, to update the plan, it's something that it could easily be done.
But a new plan would cost us $60 to $100, and that seems foolish.
That is the industry average for a community of your size.
And before you started, I looked at a lot of other plans that people had done, and it looked like an intern had basically copied a lot of Google results, and they were terrible. Whereas this looks like a lot of thoughtful work has gone into it. And even if there may be areas that don't reflect the community consensus, or there is no community consensus, at least it's useful information that can't be obtained through casual observation or perusal of the internet. And there's a lot of original research here.
And I think the students did amazing work on actually designing something that would be out. I would have never thought of it myself, type of things. And I know that something that I constantly hear in your city council meetings and your P&Z board meetings is that water is costing a lot, sewer is costing a lot. And they thought up the idea of how can we like provide these bioswells and these permeable pavements to reduce the amount of flooding and also reduce the cost on how much we have to pay to water our plants in our parks, those type of things. Those are great ideas that I wouldn't have thought of myself, and that if the city wants to implement that, they can. And there's a lot more ideas that are in the plan that we didn't go over today because we're already bouncing on 1 hour, and there was just so much that I couldn't put in there. Yet again, the full plan will be provided to the city next week, and I'm sure Dave or somebody will post it online. Please feel free to either contact me with your comments, or to Dave or to someone in the city, and that will get to me. We still have options for editing, but I think the time that I have allotted for this community, for this project, is winding down, especially since my boss is wanting me to get onto other projects. Not to say that I won't be here for you for other reasons, but it's just one of those things.
Walter, I've got a question. I noticed on the slide about funding, and
Yeah.
I kind of quickly read the definitions of the funding qualifications. And some of those didn't seem, there were only 3 of them that I saw on the screen. Is there other funding? Because they didn't seem to apply to our city.
There's a lot of funding and a lot of variance on funding. It's a lot of this stuff is a working document that we have to update every quarter for communities of this size. And even if they say, oh, we're only kind of looking for this, there's quite a bit of wiggle room on these funding sources to adjust for you. Also, you are considered a rural area community, so a lot of those funding sources have quite a bit of wiggle room when it comes to who can apply for it.
Okay, great, thank you. Is there anyone else out there that has any questions? There was a question in the chat. What's the path forward on the downtown improvement, street parking, sidewalks, connectivity, and what would be the funding source?
So,
Walter?
you can answer if you want.
Well, what I'll add from the city's end is, so we're kind of looking at 2 projects in tandem, one being the comprehensive plan and then, dovetailing into that, but a separate project being the downtown, sort of redevelopment or, re-envisioning of downtown. And so I think now what the plan is to, once we, begin to, feel like we've got a handle on the comprehensive plan, then, as a separate track, staff's going to be reaching out to design firms for bids or SOQs for the design process for downtown. And obviously, when you look at a downtown project like that, it needs to be a very holistic process where a lot of the stuff that we'll be looking at, the ultimate goal will be to create a great pedestrian space, but at the same time, we're going to be looking at things like infrastructure to ensure that all of those projects are addressed and done before, really kind of investing in the streetscape stuff. So,
and I would imagine we'll be working in tandem with or in consideration with the TxDOT program or the plan that they have.
That's right. And yeah, then there's the TxDOT, collaboration piece on it. So.
One of the things that I recommend in the comprehensive plan is to get in touch as soon as possible with the Texas Main Street program, because they have experience working with TxDOT They also have funding for projects and can guide the city through also the legal process that is required and the design process that would be required for these things. They have definitely worked with other communities that their main street is also the state highway. So they know this type of thing. It is a law minefield when it comes to working these things. But if you show that you have your plan, you then show that you have some designs that you want to pursue, they can work with you and walk you through this type of project.
And I think there was another question in the chat here from Councilman Kevin Lacey, who has a very good point. He had asked, and Walter, you may know some other cities that have done some Main Street work. One that he had pointed out that I know that you did some work on was Navasota.
That is correct. Navasota was my my graduate project. I worked on that comprehensive plan, and the big thing that I helped design on was the alleyways and the alleyway art. That was the thing that we really wanted to push to connect the off-site parking to the main street. You only want to have you want to reduce the amount of setback on any type of business that is along Main Street, because you want it to be a walking space only and a clear buffer between the business, the sidewalk, and where the cars belong.
You know, and I believe if I recall, I had heard a presentation from the city manager of Navasota fall before last, and I think they, you know, just to kind of touch on some of the funding, they had used the Texas Capital Fund. They were able to get a lot of funding through the Texas Capital Fund for a lot of those street improvements. And again, with TxDOT, I don't know the specifics of it, but I do know that there was some funding sources that they used there that, you know, again, were guided, you know, by Walter and his group. So
they also got a grant from TxDOT to do wayfinding in the city. The gateways that are currently there was one of the first projects that were funded in the city for their downtown revitalization.
Madam Mayor, Mila Mabry here. May I ask a question? And forgive me if I've jumped out of turn and if I need to wait, and I'm happy to do so.
Go ahead, Milo. You've got the floor.
Sure. Hey, Walter, thank you. I'm an Aggie class of 95, so appreciate you. But just out of curiosity, from a housing perspective, on some of the visions that you and your teams have done, do you have any pelts on the barn? And do you have any examples where developers have come in and seen a city's vision and said, gosh, that sounds great. I'm interested. I see the payoff. I see the potential. And gosh, sorry guys, a phone call came in. Forgive me, Mayor. You know, do you have any pelts on the barn where people said, yeah, I want to do that. I'm in. I want to build it. I'd love to put housing in the way you describe it on this particular location, and I can afford to do it and still make a profit.
A lot of it is actually going after those developers, promoting those type of, saying, hey, here's our vision. We have this master plan that we would like to see. We are looking for a developer to create this. And part of the give and take on it is, hey, if you will follow our design plans, we will make it easier for you to develop whatever X, Y, and Z here. That is the big thing of doing it. And unfortunately, we are limited to, in all these type of developments, is how profitable will it be? So if there's way to make it more profitable for the developer, then they'll do it. If there is incentives that the city can use to make it worth their while, they can do it, either waiving impact fees or the city paying for certain types of infrastructure be connected to those types of developments. Those are all options that the city has to do. A lot of times it is just finding that developer that has the same vision as you and then working together to get it done.
Walter, my question is do you have an example from your work where that has happened?
So in my history, I used to work for Harris County, and I did environmental I did environmental. Sorry, I did environmental work and disaster recovery work. The only time that I've ever had something that was similar to this type of project a project that I've actually worked on, it came with low income housing tax credit, where we had a design, we had a place, and we said, hey, we're looking for a developer to make this type of development for these type of people. And we were able to find the correct developer, and we worked with that developer to get that made. Unfortunately, I don't have as much experience in housing development for that topic area. I do a lot of design and and floodplain management type work.
Yes, sir. Understood. No worries. I was just curious if maybe one of the cities out there that you've done this work for, was able to follow through. But anyway, thank you.
No problem.
I'll give back my time, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much for letting me participate.
Well, I have to see you. Thank you for joining.
Yes, ma'am.
So this is Bob Stewart, and I have a question I'd like to ask, kind of following up on some of the development stuff that we've just been talking about. In your plan, I didn't get to see the whole presentation. In your plan, is there any kind of comprehensive strategy on how the city can build infrastructure that will allow for this potential development in the future? For example, like there's in the northwest part of town, significant open acreage out there, but the only infrastructure I understand is that there's now been an electric line run out toward Carlisle's property, or to at least as far as that property, but there's no sewer, no water, etc. Is that part of your plan, or does that fall to someone else? Or is the city's plan to try to get the developers to do all that?
So this plan does some of that, but not all of it. A lot of this plan is really trying to focus on promoting as much infill as possible, because it is the cheapest possible thing for the city to do. It reduces the amount of maintenance costs that the city will have to do if it continues to extend its lines. But inside the funding guide, there are different types of funding and project and grants that can help fund those type of projects to extend infrastructure. A lot of them have to do with rural communities, to try to provide, especially if there is, let's pretend there is a house somewhere over there and it's on septic tank. There are projects that try to remove septic tanks and try to connect sewer and water to those homes. The whole goal of it is to improve water quality throughout the coast and through our watersheds. So a lot of it is, I want to do this. Let's see what type of funding that we can get for this type of thing. Here's our plan. This is why we want to do it. This is why we're a good candidate for you to give us this money, because we want to reach this goal. I hope I answered your question.
But generally speaking, the city's stance has been that it's not the city's responsibility, we are not in it to enrich private property owners by extending utilities. Now, if there was an economic purpose as in creating jobs or something like that, then that might be a different story where we could work out a longer term arrangement. And the city has worked out and created a multi-year payback if somebody were to extend utilities and to allow people further on or closer in to tap in, and the person who extended the utilities and paid for all of that to get payment for the value of the tie-in. But generally speaking, improving the private property values just by extending utilities isn't necessarily, at least from my perspective, economic development.
It kind of rolls back into if you find a developer that wants to design the plan or wants to build the plan that you guys have, that might be one of the negotiation points. It could also be something that you make a TIF, tax increment finance, to fund those type of infrastructure improvements. All those things are part of the give and take and the negotiation part between the city and developers.
Right, a multi-use development in which jobs are created, and especially, sales tax is generated, that's a longer term benefit to the entire community, is a completely different story.
So it's aimed more at kind of a passive approach of getting the developers to invest in the infrastructure versus investing in the infrastructure as a city so that developers will come.
Can you repeat the question? I didn't understand it. I apologize.
So it was not a question, it was just more of a statement that the approach is more of a passive approach of encouraging developers through incentives to invest in the infrastructure that they hope to then pay for on the backside as they do their development, versus investing in the infrastructure to encourage development.
That makes sense.
Okay.
It's kind of like if if a developer decides to build outside of the city in the ETJ zone or farther right outside the ETJ zone, and they develop their own mud to provide utilities to that development. And basically what that is saying, hey, we have our own utilities. You could annex us if you want, because then you don't have to spend all that money on this infrastructure. That's one way of looking at it. Or the community is saying, we don't want to deal with the city, we have our own stuff. So it's either way.
Yeah, but I'm talking about land already inside the original city limits.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, which is a different situation than an extraterritorial jurisdiction.
Yes.
So currently, given our budget, we don't have extra funds to do that. But Walter, is there any kind of support of infrastructure inside the city on private property?
You would have to look through it. I'm sure there is some, especially if you're trying to enhance the city. A lot of it just depends on what group or of people that you might be trying to help, or what part of the community that you're trying to work in. If it's saying something like, hey, we're trying to make this area more resilient, or we want to protect water use here, so we don't want the installation of septic tanks. There are possibilities for funding out there. You'll have to find it. I can't think of one off the top of my head right now. I know that community development block grant might, depending on what area of the community you're looking at, they might be willing to fund a project. It just depends.
I'll read one more question we got from Tim and Julie Davis, and it says, if the city can get free money or grant money to help expand the city water and city loop, meaning I think the road around the city, to help expedite growth, why would you not go after the free money? I'll defer to Walter on this, but kind of just one of the things that I'll say, I know enough about it to not really know anything at all, but just knowing that one of the things, even if you get the grant money to fund the project, at that point, and some of it, probably goes into the way that cities account for financing, but things like, water pipes in the ground or sewer pipes in the ground, you list those on the asset side of your balance sheet, but in reality, those are they're tools, but they're not an asset in the sense that you can divest yourself of that asset. And when you have a life cycle cost of, say, something like a sewer line or a water line, if it's sitting, if the stuff next to it can't pay for the water line or the sewer line, you're in essence, you're running just a long shell game on your financing. So again, while there's funding for the initial project, if you don't have then the tax increment benefit to fund that project ongoing, then what you've done is just put yourself in a position to have to come up with the money later.
The other thing is there's no such thing as free money. A lot of these grants, you have to remember that it's usually 20-80. That means the city has to bring up 20% of the funds, and then they will get the additional amount of money. And on top of that, it's weirder because it's 20% that you fund the first 20% of the project, and then you get refunded that 20% to build the second stage, and then continue refund until you've gotten to that point where you spent 20% of the budget. And Dave is exactly correct. Every time you put infrastructure in, that costs money to the city in the long term, because that is more money you have to make sure that you can have to fix it if it breaks. So nothing is free, but it definitely is at reduced price. So if we continually to grow into an area that we don't have people, like Dave said, then we have no one funding the repair service for that piece of infrastructure.
So what does it look like for a landowner that has half their property in the city and half their property outside of the city, all on the same plat, to be stuck or landlocked because of utilities? Like, how do they get the utility services if the city can't finish the loop financially and the developer refuses to develop based upon the financial money that has to go literally in the ground to create infrastructure? So what does that look like for halt or expansion of growth?
So Dave, if you want to answer this one, I only have
Sure.
anecdotal on this one. So
Sure. With regard to to where you guys are in a situation where the city has services that are relatively near, within a 500-700 feet or so of a site, they can extend the utilities down. But there's kind of when you get on that dead end line or at the edge of the system, there is again, you're in kind of a tough spot because there is a certain amount of disconnect with trying to get the utilities down to kind of that last mile of service, to borrow a term from the logistics world.
it really is a tough one there, because I know that I've experienced it myself with my parents' home, where utilities didn't come out as far. And usually it's not free if you're the last person on that lot. But if development occurs past you, then you can get the installation for free. Unfortunately, it's a hard position to be in, and I totally understand where you're coming from.
So I agree, it's a hard situation to be in, but at the same time, if someone had passed that line of having utilities to them wants to build, the city will turn around and not allow them to drill a water well, will not allow them to run a septic system. They say they have to be on city type stuff, but it's not there. So here's another question, Walter. Is the approach that Montgomery's taking with, and I call it the passive approach, that will let the developers figure out how our infrastructure will work, is that typical of most Texas cities of our size?
I have to say, kind of yes, because cities of your size are really constrained by the amount of money that they have in the bank. It is providing additional services outside of where you currently provide it is extremely expensive. And unless they had a grant that could help subsidize the cost, or if the developer or if the person or individual wants to subsidize the cost, then it could be provided, but it's really hard for the city to actually afford those type of things. It is one of the biggest problems when it comes to smaller, low capacity communities trying to grow, is that cost is so high. It's really, really high, and the money might not be there. So it is very normal for developers or individuals to actually provide those connections to existing services, which is also the reason why in my plan I emphasize infill, because it's much cheaper and you can easily get more grants to fix existing infrastructure than it is to get new infrastructure.
Yeah, I assumed that was going to be your answer. So one other question, same question worded differently. I think I saw in the presentation that we're relatively, well, we are a small city, so we have all the problems of the small communities. But I assume, due to the fact that we have a fairly high income bracket, that our tax base is probably higher than a lot of small cities that I've lumped in with us, at least mentally. Is that true? And so the question would be, are cities of our tax base relying on developers to do the infrastructure, or are they being more proactive?
So it's a little weird, because while Montgomery does have high cost land, Montgomery also has like some of the lowest like tax rates in that area, from my understanding. This is something that I reviewed back almost 2 years ago, so it's not fresh on my mind. But from my understanding, it was like a couple quarter percentage points lower than surrounding areas. So still, even within that type of, so let's pretend that you guys were Flower Mound, which you're not, which is a much higher income community outside of Dallas. They can afford that type of stuff because not only do they have high cost property, but they have higher tax rates. So they can afford to develop or put in new types of development in that area. But then in addition to that, they have their own little subdivision communities that pay for quite a bit of infrastructure, so the city doesn't have to pay for it. So it's a kind of a mixture. The answer to your question is yes and no, unfortunately. I'm sorry, it's not a clear answer.
All right. Thanks a bunch. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Does anyone have any last questions or thoughts for Walter before we conclude our virtual town hall? Well, if not,
I have one thought, Dave.
sure.
Thanks for setting this up. I thought it was a really enlightening meeting and a good way to do this given the difficult times we're all in. And I would love to have looked at my screen and seen the little pictures of all the people be so small that I couldn't tell who they actually were. So it's kind of sad, but I'm guilty of this more than probably anyone in town, of not getting involved enough, and that we don't have more people kind of listening in on this.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being part of it, Bob. And tell Ms. Stewart hi, and everyone again, thank you so much for being on the call. And Walter, we'll be talking to you soon. Guys, for those of the public that are here, always feel free to reach me at Dave. I'm on the website. You could find, you can find my email there. It's a long one. I won't, make you try to remember it, but always feel free to contact us. We're happy to talk about this stuff and share anything we have. So thank you all very much again.
Thank you, Walter. It's been a pleasure working with you.
Thank you so much. I also want to say one more thing, that I really enjoyed working inside your community. I thought the people there were all super friendly and really knowledgeable. I am totally serious. Me and my wife really are looking at houses in Montgomery. I am not playing a game with you. I am deadly serious on this. Yet again, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all my time that I spent with you. I will be giving Dave the final draft the final draft, still could be made edits, next week. Please provide him with as many comments as you can. I can dedicate another 2 to 3 weeks max on making edits, and I can't do any more. So get those comments in early, and thank you again so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks all. Good night.
Bye.
Dave, thanks, Susan. Thanks, Richard from the city.